I need this to end right now, but I want it. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our October Professor Circle. This series seems to be a highlight for so many of our UNLV faculty and staff. And we're glad from an intersection standpoint to be able to continue to do this series. This month, we are going to be looking at navigating the psychology of emotional tax in higher education. And as we were saying before the session started, many of us are feeling that emotional tax right now with so much going on in the world. And as we're trying to navigate our own spaces here on campus, as we, try to do our jobs and take care of students. And so I'm not going to keep running my mouth. I'm going to pass this over to Dr. Rab, who is the assistant professor in residence in the Department of Psychology, who is going to lead this session. I'm excited. And so thank you so much for joining us this morning and leading this session for us. We all need it today, as well as that gospel music that
We'll
Barbara was
definitely
talking
save
about.
time for that. Yeah.
Absolutely. Amen.
So definitely I want to introduce myself. I'm an assistant professor in residence over in the psychology department. I teach classes like motivation and emotion, psychology of learning, research methods, and even the first year seminar courses for our first year students. And so what the whole reason that we're talking about the emotional tax is basically a lot of the definitions you might recognize, but actually feeling it is another story as you work in academia as faculty and staff and dealing with the multitude of, it feels like we've lived through so many unprecedented times already. Like how much more can we have in our lives? And so I want to share what is emotional. And so you might have heard this in various different formats. For example, in higher education, it's that psychological burden and stress that a lot of underrepresented students, faculty, and staff have to deal with in terms of navigating biases, discrimination, and exclusion. I know for the sake of this lecture, especially that email we got from Dr. President Heavey, I'm going to keep this as neutral as possible, no name calling, but you know what I'm saying. So at this time, we have a lot of this emotional tax that we're feeling, especially in the mid-semester, as a lot of changes are happening with administration and higher education. Who knows what's going to happen next? It drains all of our mental resources. It requires us to stay constantly on guard, always saying, oh, can I say this? Is this allowed? Is this applicable? And this can lead to a lot of negative mental health effects, especially with our well being. If you look at your work life balance on top of being a faculty, staff, or administrator, you have multitude of other roles that you're playing day to day. And some of the things that I've noticed is that with Adam Grant, who's an organizational psychologist, you might have seen his viral post here and there on LinkedIn, but he said that women especially get asked 44% more requests than men to do thankless jobs, planning events, hosting meetings, doing things like taking notes. You might notice that. And so this emotional pressure for us to say yes often undermines our own mental well-being. And sometimes we might even get penalized for saying no in our various roles. So with this, the psychological toll that we have on underrepresented folks, I'll just use faculty of color, for example, this is going to increase emotional stress. So you might notice that it'll be the little things that'll stall your careers. For example, dealing with students' behaviors. Students might come to you more often as they see you as a faculty of color and might be able to relate more to you. But that's more of a thankless job where you have to do it and you feel that pressure in order to do it. It increases the stress, the work-life imbalances. Oftentimes we get isolated in our offices. I noticed that at UNLV, we work in silos. So it's very interesting to see that our demands of work are varying. Like we're united, but at the same time, we're working individually on different aspects in academia. And we may often interact with one another, for example, using the professor circle. We might vent about what's going on in our lives, in our committees, in our departments. But academia needs to be more human centered overall in order to build healthy relationships. We shouldn't have faculty or staff crying in their offices or lashing out at one another because of what they're watching on the news or what they're experiencing in their day to day lives. And so this emotional toll that you're feeling is systemic. It's also cultural. And there's various factors that make burnout in academia more alarming, and it's often overlooked. In higher education, there's this op-ed that they talked about the burnout in academia, and a lot of the burnout has to do with the lack of social support that faculty and staff are feeling. And if they don't get that social support, it doesn't matter what research they're doing, what grants they're doing, that can also limit their promotion, their tenure, all sorts of reasons. And so, with these significant emotional burdens, there's a lot of psychological burdens too. Some of these terms you might recognize. So I want to go over a few, and you can just like raise your hand if you recognize or you've experienced any of these. The first one being unrewarded services. So, if you felt the need to perform any type of cultural taxation on serving on diversity committees, mentoring students of color, things like that are rarely valued in our promotion research and tenure reviews, but actually should be, while the white peers use that more time to get rewarded for stuff like research activities, and it's not really highlighted. So if you feel that, that's probably an unrewarded service where there's no merit for doing things like serving on a special interest group, for example. You might also have experienced question legitimacy. People might ask, do you really have a PhD? Which is some questions I probably get often, not only for my age, but also different reasons too. But faculty may feel the need to constantly justify their position. They have X years of experience in this field, and they often feel worried that they're perceived as a token hire. I actually made a joke when I first got hired. I was like, "Am I a diversity hire?" Because I noticed I noticed on that wall that I was the only round one there. So they said no, but hopefully you kind of see that question legitimacy where you feel, are you a qualified expert or are you maybe something else? You might also feel another psychological burden, and this is called the emotional labor. This is performing formal duties. Oftentimes, faculty of color are often relied upon to have managed emotional needs. You might hear the things like, oh, you should control your attitude, or the way that your facial experiences might kind of have at a meeting that might get called out. Oftentimes, people correct your tone or the way that you speak. This can have an impact on your own feelings. You might perform uncompensated emotional labor related to DEI work. So, everything that you're seeing that's happening that's affecting students, it might affect you more emotionally, especially if you're a faculty of color or if you're a faculty with a disability and you're seeing all the discrimination that's happening, even in the LGBTQ plus community, and you feel that formal duty that you have to kind of stand up and speak and advocate because you are part of that population. And it also affects you personally speaking too. Another one you might have felt throughout your careers are probably imposter syndrome. This might feel like you often don't belong. You're not admitted, not only because of your expertise, but you might feel like you're here for a diversity quota. It's not based on the merit. Oftentimes diminishes or erodes our self-confidence that we have. And it can also reduce our sense of belonging if you have these imposter syndrome feelings that you might feel like you're the only one out there with this discrimination that you're facing. Hypervisibility is another thing that marginalized groups feel. They might often feel over visible for their race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, and they might feel invisible for their other skills and their own individual personalities. So you oftentimes feel like people are seeing you for the overt way that you're looking instead of the internal ways that you are in terms of your skill, who you are as a person, and what your expertise are. And the last one that I want to talk about, or the last couple ones, you might have felt racial battle fatigue. I feel like we're constantly in this, just watching the news. It's a constant daily experience of microaggression, biases, and discrimination that can lead to profound emotional and physical exhaustion. That's explained to my psychology 412 students. The reminder of correlation does not equal causation. So no, Tylenol does not equal autism. But still out there, we have a whole lot of misinformation. And I feel like as an educator, I can't keep on educating every single person in this world to remind them that correlation does not equal causation. Tokenism is something that a few of us probably have experienced as underrepresented groups, especially with our students. They're probably viewed as token. They weigh the bear of their entire identity group. And this can lead to a lot of racial stress, pressure, loneliness, and a lot of these significant emotional burdens can impact you. So I want to leave some room for discussion because what else do you think are impacting faculty and staff emotionally as we're working in academia during these times? And you can just unmute yourself and introduce however you want.
Well, we're certainly getting a lot with just every single day, with this new administration. It's a
Yeah.
new issue that arises from, and will I be able to afford to go to school? Is my financial aid going to cover it? Immigration issues,
Hmm.
any kind of real information, safety.
Hmm.
It's every single day it's something new. Almost every hour, I would argue, but I don't want to be pessimistic.
Yeah, definitely. Especially safety, especially since today is a significant day with the October 1st. And that brings back a lot of memories for students who were there, during that event in 2017. Anything else that you guys want to share?
One of the things that I run into quite often is that there are rules that we have to follow, and
Hmm.
there is things have to meet a certain standard. And there are sometimes when folks decide that who are in power, well, we're going to say we no longer want this, and I don't care what it is. Well, that you can't do that.
Hmm.
There's this thing called, believe it or not, like there's state law, there's federal law. And what I also try to explain to folks is not only is there that, but it's the image in the community,
Hmm.
which will way better. But I'm in charge. I say do it this way. Oh, well, I can't do it that way. I'll get you as close as I can. And then as they say, we'll see you in court because that's exactly where they're going to end up. And
Hmm.
everybody goes, oh, how do we end up here?
Yeah. And I feel like this is also adding to the role on top of your job that you're already doing. You're having to take on other responsibilities that are leading to you worrying, staying up late at night. A lot of depression symptoms are popping up. We're currently seeing, like, in our students, not only like burnout emotionally, but just fatigue. Like, they just have apathy coming in, like they don't care anymore. There's been so much issues happening one after the other that they're feeling it. And I see it in the classrooms, definitely. So I want to shift over to what can we do in order to pay ourselves back with this emotional tax. And it's not helping the community. It feels like we're reaching this issue or like a hard wall and we don't know what's behind the wall or what's going to happen next. And a lot of this multi-pronged approach that targets these systemic issues, I've never felt more helpless as a psychologist in my career until now. And oftentimes these burdens that we have, we feel it at an individual level to cope. And some of these strategies are things that we could do institutionally. So I have a few of these strategies that I just want to go over, but even just addressing the issues is really important. Just a little background, I had my Ph.D. from University of Houston, and I worked there for 7 years as a clinical assistant professor in Houston. And now I'm back here in UNLV thinking I escaped all of that. And it's now deja vu where I'm experiencing everything they were talking about and now experiencing federally instead of state. And so with this, we have to prioritize institutional responsibility and acknowledge the source of the problem, not the individual. And so institutions got to look over their structures. Some of our policies are also outdated. The practices that we have that impose these emotional burdens need to be discussed. A lot of the equitable distribution in terms of DEI labor. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a lot of first gen faculty on this campus. It feels like they're also taking on the role of helping out first gen students, and that is disproportionately unequal. So it shouldn't be done by the underrepresented faculty. It should be equal distribution of a lot of these DEI labors. Another thing is that providing adequate compensation. Till this day, I'm still fighting for women to get equal pay. They said by 2070 we'll have it. I said, sir, I will be gone by 2070 in terms of equal pay. So we're seeing things that are not okay in terms of formally recognized and compensating work. A lot of DEI work should be compensated. A lot of tenure processes for faculty, you often might notice gender discrimination in that process. There's also a lot of validation that might underlimit your expertise if someone sees that you're basically paying that emotional tax on an underrepresented identity. And it reduces your sense of being exploited when you have a lot of compensation that happens. So what happens is it feels like you're doing all this extra work, but there's no paycheck attached to it. So when people ask me, how many hours do you work? I'm like, well, my job's never ending. It's always like you always have questions from students. It might be life questions, advice, and that goes beyond the scope of just grading paper. And so a lot of this can be basically at the institutional level help if you enhance mentorship, which is something our psychology department is doing. We're making sure that every new faculty member has at least 3 mentors. So if someone says, I'm too busy, you got 2 more other people to ask them questions, right? So this creates transparent, equitable mentorship programs for underrepresented faculty and students to let them know that, hey, I've been through this too. I had to navigate how Las Vegas works and how the city works and why people don't stop at stop signs all day, right? And you can give them some advice too. Another thing is offering mental health support. I know we have TAPS in the FAST and a lot of the care center in terms of if you're facing like sexual or gender-based violence. But a lot of this is also to increase cultural competency in our mental health programs and a lot of our counseling services, not only for students, but I want to remind it's also there for faculty and staff if they're experiencing discrimination or navigating through bias. So I have some questions. What are you doing at your department or within your groups to kind of navigate at the institutional level some ways that you might help a faculty or staff member if they're facing some emotional burdens or they're just getting overwhelmed in life?
What we tend to do in our office, which has been a standard practice, is that we talk about it. We create a space where we have a motto that's like we don't candy coat it, and we're going to talk about the good, bad, and indifferent. And so that's scarier now because people are losing jobs and losing all of the things that got them to where they're at by doing that. And so we are aware of that, but we're known for that. So if you have an issue, we come in and help you to validate what you just experienced, that yes, that's what happened and what you're feeling is validated, and try to provide other examples of how to address the issue if it's addressable, talk through scenarios and possible resolutions, and then discuss like worst case, best case, and personal responsibility, which is hard because it's an always moving target, and sometimes we're not emotionally ready for what that answer looks like.
Yeah, I also feel that way sometimes too when students ask, especially if they're undocumented students and they come to me asking what can I do? And even I don't have all the answers. That's definitely an emotional burden. Yeah.
I will have people refer students to me, particularly students of color, who are dealing with issues that deal with the classroom or with an instructor or with treatment. And like Ada just said, I don't sugarcoat it for them. Like, yeah, you want to compare notes? Because I'm gonna tell you, ain't much changed since I went through this. But let's talk about what's most important. And I learned a phrase years ago. It was in a course I was taking, and the professor's name was Dr. Jacqueline Cash. And she said, "Is this the hill you want to die on?" And when she put it in that perspective, I haven't found a hill I want to die on yet. I've come pretty close, but not yet. And so I will say to folks, look, is this the hill you want to die on? And I remember saying to one student, okay, here's how you're going to need to play this game. And as exhausting as it sounds, trust me, it will be less exhausting than what you're doing now. And you will reap the rewards of it. Is it shameful that we have to act this way? Yes. Is it going to get better? Maybe. They're still here. Maybe there are less of them. I don't know. But here's what we need to do. And we've had some lengthy talks and about how that makes them feel to do that. And it's like, okay, but we got to move forward. And a lot of times I tell them, your feelings, as much as you feel them, let's find somewhere else for those to be an outlet. Because where you're thinking they count, they don't. And you got to take care of you in this or you won't be here. So that being very clear with folks about expectations is extremely important. And it's also helpful to me because I don't have to say, oh, what did I tell them? I know what I told them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that because a lot of times you might sound mean or you might get called the B word, but at least you're standing your ground in your morals and your values. Amanda in the chat wrote that what we do also in the psychology department is our grad students, we give them like an anonymous survey. so we can kind of see the Department of the Culture or burnout and collectively have that data and present it to faculty to have actionable items of like, what can we do to fix this? And that's something that I feel like has to be done continuously. You can't just give them one survey 10 years ago and say, these are the problems that still happen in today. 10 years ago, those problems are different than what the students are going through now. So it's always good, even anonymously, just to ask the climate that's going on. I think we should also do that for faculty and staff too.
Has that worked? Meaning, has it helped to make some shifts in terms of, even if it's little baby steps in terms of the culture,
Yeah,
potential culture? And does that help?
I think it does because it brings awareness. For example, when I came here, I didn't know the amount of the graduate stipends were. And I was shocked because I came from Texas. And I'm like, how are you getting less than what I got in Texas as a graduate student? And so just bringing that awareness was just a mind opening for us and having our students just even disclose, that they're facing these challenges.
Okay.
And so a lot of faculty now have like open education resource, so we're less likely to make them buy textbooks and stuff. So some things, sometimes we have resources, but sometimes we don't have the answer right away. Like there's some students that are asking, do we still have freedom of speech? Currently we feel like we do, but it doesn't feel that way, right? So institutionally, we might feel a certain way, but the actionable items, those could also change too, depending on where we're going. And we're going to see our future and our history. But another thing that was a good point is bringing up the systemic reform. And this is promoting transparency. And just even doing a quick survey in your department saying, hey, are you okay? Do you need help with anything? That just gives you a clear and honest communication from administration to faculty, even to students. Is there any hurdles they're facing beyond, like particularly beyond their workload, maybe that's affecting their promotion and tenure process? Because when I came from University of Houston, one of my advisors didn't get tenure. Unfortunately, her husband had passed away that year. And the reason that she wasn't given tenure is they told her, we're sorry for your loss of your husband, but you still need to keep publishing. And her husband had just passed away that year, and she couldn't explain, and that discouragement, that lack of trust, she felt like no one listened to her as she was grieving. And she did get 6 months off, but they wanted her to still keep publishing, even though she had just lost her husband. And so that transparency, that lack of care, the lack of empathy, it definitely impacts individuals. And so we have to also diversify leadership and have different leaders that say, hey, I've been through this. I've experienced what you've gone through. There's a grievance policy and let's help you out as much as possible instead of saying, oh, sorry, your husband died, but you didn't publish anything this year. So there goes your tenure. And that can definitely lead to a lot of inequity that we see in academia, especially faculty and staff that have children or young ones that they're taking care of on top of their workload. That's also adding to that emotional tax. And it signals an institutional commitment to inclusion. And sometimes that inclusion part forgets that we have life going on at the same time, like beyond our roles, beyond our titles, and beyond this. We also have things going on in the background that can impact our promotion and tenure status. And then also investing in education, providing unconscious bias training for all faculty. I do this with my students. There's that project implicit bias test that Harvard does to see if you have biases against things like weight, even discrimination. We see things like in terms of age discrimination that people might have unconsciously. And just being aware of that and recognizing that we might be perpetuating in this discrimination, but there are ways that I can still learn more. And it's okay to kind of have that transparency and say, hey, I was wrong. I didn't know all this that was going on about you, and then have that conversation. But unfortunately, in a lot of the systemic world, corporate world, the real world, life goes on. And if things happen in between life that are going to impact you emotionally, your job may or may not be able to help you out. And they'll find a replacement. And that's the unfortunate truth of the system that we live in, which is capitalism. There's always a replacement. And that's not okay in terms of building or helping out your community in that sense. Another thing is that I want to also share this role too. This is from the National Education Association of Educators, and the mental health crisis that they have these individual and community coping strategies also have this embracing a healing justice and setting boundaries. And this is also for your well-being. And I know people use the word self-care a lot in terms of having as a individual coping strategy. But if you look at it as a form of resistance and just tell them like, hey, I'm not going to answer any emails after 5 p.m. I have a family to take care of. You set that boundary, you set that rule, and you let people know, even your students, that you're not available after this time because you have responsibilities outside of life and you can't be there 24/7. And it's okay. And a lot of students actually respect that. Let them know that I'm not going to answer you in the middle of the night. Like, I know you have a dying email and need that extension, but I'm just not going to read it at 1 a.m. So just letting them know that. Building coalitions, if you notice there's special interest groups and in this university, for example, I'm part of the Asian Pacific Islander Middle Eastern Faculty Association. And so we just meet up, have coffee, talk about life, meet up with the director of faculty affairs, who just happens to be from an underrepresented group too, and just talk about how we feel isolated or marginalized or what we can do or how's work going or how's your building? Is it being maintained? Little nitpicky things like that, just to get over all the stuff that we're going through. And then the last tip I have for you is building that emotional intelligence. A lot of times we don't have the solution for everything. I feel like as a psychologist, navigating these emotional difficulties and stressors, the most common answer that you might have here is like, go to therapy, go through self-care and have someone to talk to. But also communicating your challenge is very important, and being a self-advocate is just as important for who you are or what you're feeling and what you're experiencing. Not every task carries the same weight. Not all of us have the same identity, so we might not all be able to relate to each other, but we all have the ability to learn to distinguish between what's urgent and what's important. And a lot of us have to focus on our high impact work that we're currently doing. And we have to let go of perfectionism wherever it's possible, because there are life challenges that people are facing. And being able to be a compassionate leader means that you have to learn how to navigate through those challenges, that whatever life throws at you, because there will be challenges that people are facing. So I want to open the floor for discussion to anybody else that has any other strategies or coping ideas, whether it's something you do or something you've seen in your culture, your system, even at another institution.
I
Well,
really go ahead. Sorry.
years ago, I mean, many, many years ago, I landed this job, and there were all other folks who didn't look like me who didn't get the job. And so one day in this meeting, someone says, well, Barb, I know you're happy for affirmative action because it worked for you. That's what got. I said, are you serious? And so what I did, since I have a tendency to find out about people I work with, I listed all of this person's inadequacies as compared to me. And of course, that was, real bridge building kind of stuff, but I didn't care. How dare you say that to me in front of a room full of people? So you didn't care? I don't care. So I remember calling my mom, and I said, Mom, you're not going to believe what happened today. And I said, you know this. She said, baby, look, you know that's not true. They know it's not true. It's designed to hurt you and to get you to do certain things. She said, but I'm going to tell you, on the other hand, if finally it's working for you, let it work. And I had to laugh because it was, well, yeah, I'm here. And what about it? But for me, it was, how dare you? And I can defend where, because I'm going to tell you how low down you are. But, my mom said, hey, if it's working for you, let it work. After she did all her other comforting stuff. And I've never forgotten that. So when I hear nonsense, okay, it's working for you. It's not easy, but sometimes you just have to bite it.
That was so powerful, Barbara. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Hmm.
Because, I was like, embrace the savage. That's like my middle name. Like, let me this for you. But I appreciate the bringing it to full circle, like, and because we encounter that in so many spaces and in so many ways all the time, and particularly now where people are feeling bolder in making that. So having that perspective that you just shared, it's like the universe is speaking to me through you. So thank you.
Anytime.
Thank you.
My mom had a lot of sayings, and they got me through, and they kept me from catching a case.
Yeah, there were definitely times where you might have heard things that you're like, oh, why would they say that? I remember being at a meeting in the South. won't name the names, but they did say we have to keep the ivory tower ivory. And that really hurt because I knew they were indirectly speaking to me when I was in that room. So I got the message, but a lot of us over time have built that thick skin where we won't go down to their level or, discriminate them back. A lot of us have been through oppression in some way, shape, or form through various discriminations, and we know now to like be better. But at the same time, yeah, it definitely gives that emotional like, ooh, you just want to lash out at them, but you can't. That emotional regulation is high. We got to control it. Yeah, definitely.
I will.
Anybody else want to share? Yeah.
I found myself several years ago I was on a board of one of these places that everybody wants to be on. So everybody in the city's on. And I did a couple oh, we'd love to have you on our board. And I'm thinking, do you know what you're really asking for? So they were going to do a board retreat and they were going to do ice breaking exercises. And there was some diversity on the board. And in that particular meeting, there was good representation. And this one woman said, oh, what we're going to do, we're all bringing in baby pictures and we're going to try to figure out who's who. And I said, no, you're not. And they went, Barbara, why? Don't you have any baby pictures? I said, yeah, I do. But I got a feeling that there are some of us you're going to be able to identify before you identify others. Now, just what do you mean? I said, take a moment, look around the room and think about what they might have looked like as a baby. Oh, and everyone else in the room was silent, even the folks of color, because I've also been one of those folks who said, okay, I'm putting my foot in my mouth before I can get it out. But if I don't say it, then I'm going to have to sit up there and go through this dumbass exercise, excuse me, like everybody else, knowing that it's stupid and it's meaningless. Because how am I going to guess who somebody is when you already got a pretty good clue? And often you have to call behavior and it can put you in an uncomfortable place. But part of it also is educating. I had a student years ago on another campus, and it was predominantly a white campus. And I heard him calling for this woman, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hamilton, Miss Hamilton. And finally he ran up and he grabbed my arm and he said, Miss Hamilton, didn't you hear me? I said, I'm not Miss Hamilton. He said, yes, you are. I said, okay, why would you think I'm Miss Hamilton? He said, well, my instructor told me she's the best counselor to go see. He said, she's a black woman. And you're black and you look like you work here, so you had to be Miss Hamilton. He didn't tell me there was more. Once the kid got to talking, he didn't care. So when I met with the faculty member, and he goes, oh, Barbara, I love Aileen. I love you. I would never. I said, wait a minute. He said, well, how else was I going to tell the student? I said, how about telling him to go to the building where she works and ask for her by name? And this look kind of came over like, like the Scooby-Doo, duh. Like, it was pretty easy. I said, if he wanted to see the other counselor, Art, would you tell him to go look for the tall, red-headed white guy? No, you'd have told him to go to the front desk and ask for her. So you've got to stop doing that. And people do it and they don't even realize they're doing it because they'll make that difference. So, and if we don't, and it becomes one more of those extra burdens that you don't get paid for, that's outside of your curriculum and not enrolled in your class. But this student was going to end up getting hurt one day by doing something just as stupid. So not only was it about teaching the professor, it was also talking to that student and giving him some tools to work outside of this world that he had become accustomed to, because it wasn't going to always be that way for him.
Oh, I just saw the chat too. But yeah, we definitely have people who don't see disability, and Amanda also shared this. Did you want to unmute yourself and explain, Amanda? Because that's a form of emotional disability. It's also that invisible disability. And then the things that you can see, you can get discriminated on. But the things that you can't see and you discriminate people on, that's another assumption too that people face. I think Amanda,
Absolutely.
yeah, you can share.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking about a peer or talking with a peer about this, and I do have type 1 diabetes, among other things as well, but specifically talking about this disability. And well, wait a second. I do experience issues because of this. I have to like in that example too, we were doing something that required a little bit more physical labor. And I said, well, my body might decide that I can't actually do this. It might drop my blood sugar low. I might have to stop and take care of this before I can continue this work. And this is something that does affect me. And just because I have worked so hard to control this doesn't mean that, I mean, I don't suffer from it. And the response was like specifically trying to say, well, no, that's not that because my disability was an easy enough disability, they were sort of trying to refer to another peer who did need more accommodations. And the fact that I didn't need those accommodations or fight for those accommodations was seen as, well, you don't use your disability as a crutch. And after that conversation, just having it stick with me and then thinking, well, wait a minute, what is a crutch for then? Like, it's supposed to be a helpful accommodation. It's something that you need in order to function. Why can't I use it as a crutch? Why can't I need crutches? Why should I be like, and sort of that backhanded sort of way of saying, well, your other colleague doesn't deserve all of the accommodations that they have earned and that they need, and somehow I'm better with my disability for not needing those. And it's still something that has stuck with me and just stings a lot. And it's it's a small comment, but it tends to go a long way.
Yeah, and that's definitely the systematic way that we view people with disabilities is, oh, you don't look as bad as so and so, or you don't look as disabled as so and so. Like just by looking at me, you wouldn't notice that I have ulcerative colitis. I'm taking biologics just to stay alive. But a lot of times people see that as, oh, you're young and healthy, or you're young, you should be okay. This disability is saved for those that are, showing it. And so we have to advocate for ourselves. So that's definitely another emotional burden that you have to do on top of your job is also say that I need these accommodations. They're actually requested and you have to do that. Definitely. Yeah, Juanita, do you want to explain your narrative that you wrote in the chat?
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. I think as I was hearing that, it was definitely just reminding me, right, of that narrative of, oh, you're not one of them, whether it's used for race, gender, visible or invisible disability. But there's always this kind of like divisiveness in a way that they're trying to create, right, when we're using that kind of language in terms of pitting one against the other, where it's simply rather than working on our own recognition and understanding of the types of needs that we each individually have and how do we better support each other. So, yeah, that's what I meant by that comment.
You were muted, Soraya.
Sorry. I just wanted to share it like sorry. I just wanted to share like the group chat. I stopped sharing my screen. But we'll definitely share the slides too because a lot of these terminologies, like people they experience it, but they don't know that they're going through these different types of psychological and emotional burdens, or like what even to do. And I feel like as an institution, if we work collaboratively across departments and say like universally that we need an assessment. We need to check the climate of the survey. Is everyone feeling okay? Like that should be something that should be handled. Unfortunately, it goes down back to the people of color who have to deal with that and create the survey, send out the survey, the thankless job of having these events, doing these things. A lot of um, unpaid merit basically is like it's valuable work. And I have people coming up to me all the time saying, "Thank you for talking about women and the unequal pay issues." And then like there's nothing happening afterwards until someone else speaks up. So a lot of times I tell people you have to find out advocates who have the privilege and the ability to make those changes. So if I had more men in those women equality talks, changes would happen real quick because we would actually be listened to and heard, and then they would take that above to leadership and say, this is what Saira said. You guys really need to make a change on this. But unfortunately, that's not the way that our society works. Sometimes we even have opponents, that will counteract and say, you don't need this. This should be part of your job. You should be thankful that you even have a job, right? And things like that. And so it undermines a lot of your work that you might feel, especially in your various roles. Did anybody else want to share their experiences? I kind of like to close the slides.
I also think that sometimes that token that we have is where we're othered, and the others come to us to have their check off or to have their questionable decision-making practices validated. It's like, well, I talked to Anna, and it's like, yeah, but you didn't leave with the right message. Like you didn't hear the message. You just assumed that by the having the one-sided talk with me validated what you were trying to do or not do. And that was like, it's my one friend who said it was okay. And it's all like, that's not what I said. But that was your actionable way of justifying whatever the situation was for yourself. And those are the taxes that are super hard that sit with you longer because you're like,
And if you notice, the more money you make as a billionaire, the less taxes you pay. Isn't that really interesting? So it's the same way in terms of like the various feelings that we have in terms of our disability. The higher up you are on that privilege, you're not asking for accommodations. You're not needing it. You have the whole room to yourself. You have the bigger office. Like you don't have to worry about that. So a lot of what we're feeling in terms of our discrimination, no matter what we're going through, you have to understand that the people who don't have those unrepresented identities, if they don't feel that way, they're not even thinking like how we're thinking. They're not having these discussions at the same level. They're like, oh, I thought everyone was paid fine, not knowing that it can vary depending on that. And there are research studies that show that faculty of color do get paid less. Like there's documentation about that. And so it just kind of like hurts to see that you're fighting for a lot of this, and then I feel like I'm doing this all over again because I did a similar talk to this at University of Houston, talking about the diversity and inclusion and why it's important to have representation. It's like 2025, I'm doing the same talk again, right? Nothing's really changed. That's the theory. For those of you that have gone through these experiences, how are you handling it? Especially if you've been in academia for like 10 plus, 20 plus years. Are there any changes that you're seeing? Are there any progresses?
girl.
Burned out. Anna's like, I've been here a while.
Girl, it's like we're just regressing on an hourly basis, you know? It's all like you said, you saw this in Texas. I'm from University of Central Florida, Orlando, and that's all that was like, 20 years ago, and I'm back there in that space again. Like, what happened? Like, what happened? And like, I was younger and meaner then, And at times I had a little more of a filter, but I don't think the filter is here anymore, and so it's challenging. And I greatly appreciate and thank you for sharing the self-care as a form of resistance. Because I've been telling folks, Dr. Bartlett, don't listen. I've been telling folks a long time, that it's like you need the time. The bell rings at 5, as one of our former colleagues used to say, and you need that time. Don't check your email and get all upset before you get here in the morning and set the tone for your day. And it's easier said than done in practice, especially because stuff is happening all the time. But it's like your personal capacity to deal and manage it's like you mentioned, it's not going to get addressed until 8 o'clock tomorrow anyway, because why? So that was the first time that I've seen somebody phrase it in that way, as that form of resistance to what's going on, and I thought that was really, really beautiful. So thank you for that.
I think quite often what we need to do is reframe. I know I do it so I can laugh. Is reframe my own thinking. You've heard me say a lot about things my parents have said. And as I said, I told you I deal with crazy people. And I love crazy. I was a therapist in a former life, and crazy paid well. But when you're in academia, folks tend to think based upon receiving tenure, or I've been here this long, or I have this title, that they can say or do whatever they want to you because you're not as important as them. So, my mom told me one day, I was telling her something I was going to have to deal with. She said, honey, look, they might be crazy, but they ain't stupid. So you put on that face to let them know, do you think I'm really somebody you won't play with? And all of a sudden, folks, as crazy as they are, think about, you know what? She's not acting very nervous about seeing me, and I'm crazy. Well, she doesn't care because she knows you're not stupid, and you're not going to ruin everything you've worked for this. And when people don't get what they want from you, my dad used to say, people in hell want ice water. They're not getting it. And so I would come with things, I'd equip myself with things that I would know would make me laugh. And those tools, and it's important to recognize your own power. And sometimes you just have to let it flow. And don't worry about it being embarrassing or whether it's off key or what somebody's going to think of you, because they wasn't thinking that great anyway. So it is, even sometimes in trying to take care of ourselves, we try to take care of ourselves in a way that we know that other people will feel okay about us taking care of ourselves that way. You need to take care of yourself the best way you know how. And if sometimes, now we can't quite do it in academia, but I did not always work in academia. And my husband used to say, and his word was a little stronger. He said, Barbara, sometimes you got to call a Maryland farmer a Maryland farmer. And for those of you who don't know what the Maryland farmer stands for, catch me later and I will tell you I can't say it on this thing that's being recorded. And I was like, oh, you can't say that to people. He worked in construction. He could say what he wanted. And one day, you know what? I had to tell somebody, look, you Maryland farmer. And it was like, oh, but they never tried that stunt again. So in taking care of yourself, what I find for me works is sometimes I just have to be the authentic me. And a whole lot of folks ain't gonna like it. But you know what? It was that other one that got me this far. Now she can take over. So, and it's hard. It's hard. But if at the end you can kind of sit back and laugh or find you a Netflix movie that will take you somewhere else, whether I love horror, I love beat 'em up, shoot 'em up, cut 'em up, and other silly stuff. But if that takes you away from it, you do that for you. But know that those folks coming in who think they're going to take you on, they got so many insecurities. All you have to say boo and you'll see stuff trickle down their legs. Don't forget your power that you have. It's in there.
Okay, so I've been doing this thing called higher education for a minute. And never before in all of my career, right, have I ever experienced anything like this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm originally from the Midwest and often talk about the higher educational politics of the Midwest and how you have to play that and how different they are from being in the West. Okay, that's all good. You just learn how to navigate that, right? But never have I ever experienced where the political atmosphere or the political environment has played so much on how we navigate and assist others in navigating higher education. Many, many years ago, when I was in Illinois, my boss and I asked this question to our supervisors, right? And I was in a higher education institution, and we asked, how much does politics influence what we do here at this university? And people looked at us like we had turned into Medusas, right? It was like, how dare you ask that question? It seemed like a completely legitimate question to us at the time. And understand this was many, many years ago when we asked that question. Then probably about 2 or 3 months later, we were in the restaurant on campus and we saw the chancellor walk in. Not a big thing. But as I said, I'm from the Midwest, right? So it's a different kind of culture. And the chancellor had on shorts. And we were like, "Ooh, what's up with that?" Because the chancellor would never be seen wearing shorts. A couple of days later, we found out that the chancellor had been fired. And it was like, oh, okay, fine. Now I know why he was in shorts. But the reason why he had been fired is because he had endorsed the wrong candidate for governor, and that candidate lost. And as a result of that, right, would be putting the institution in a really precarious situation as it did whatever negotiations it was going to be doing with Springfield. Now, and I look back on that, and that's the closest that I can get to where politics had an impact. But even with them getting rid of the chancellor, it did not have an impact on how I did my job. It did not have an impact on what I did or the services and the tax I paid with students. Where we are now is completely different, where the tax is even more. And because of how much this is playing on everything, right? I am finding it more and more difficult to pay the tax because I don't have the answers. And I don't have the tools to tell my students, my staff, how to navigate this. And I'm not getting it from the university or the universe, and if you know me, you know that I'm not saying anything I haven't said to the powers that be. So
Right.
I'm gonna do that. But I mean, I think that we are in such a precarious situation right now that regardless of where you stand or how you feel on this political spectrum that we're on, we cannot deny how much politics is infiltrating what we do on a day-to-day basis. And never did I ever think that this thing that we call academic freedom would be attacked in the way that it has been. And I just find it so, so very, very frustrating to to have to navigate. Actually, frustrating is not the right word. It really pisses me off. That's really where I am right now. And I guess, being lucky that we do have a staff where we are able to do that sharing, about feelings and then trying to navigate that. But it's very difficult right now. It's
Amen to
very
that.
difficult.
Yeah, and Amanda said in the chat, especially when the policies are there to put in place to exhaust marginalized staff and students. And one of the things that I experienced, if you look up University of Houston LGBTQ Resource Center, you get a 404 page saying this place doesn't exist. So I see that effects that are currently happening in places that have the word minority, inclusion, diversity, anything like that is going to be cut. And it's going to be unfortunate because a lot of these resources that we have, and that's why I'm glad you guys named yourselves the intersection, so you're okay for now. But at the same time, it is a target. It feels like you have a target on your back. And that target can be like, oh, we're just gonna take your job because you said you're an HSI institute and Hispanics a no word. So there goes your grant, there goes your fund.
Yeah, we
Yep.
feel it. Trust me, we feel it every day, but certainly we're in this fight and we'll continue to be in this fight. I want to really thank you. We got about 4 minutes left, and I want to thank you so much for leading this session. I certainly think that it was something that many of us needed. That's one of the things that I like about the Professor Circle, that we've been able to identify topics that I think the faculty and staff really want to be able to digest and to navigate. So thank you, Dr. Rab, so much for suggesting and agreeing to do this session for us. And many of the conversations that we were engaged in today were talking about disabilities, which moves right into what we'll be doing in November with Dr. Jennifer Reynolds, who is also here today with us, and she is going to be doing the session on navigating academia with a disability. So I'm really, really very excited about that. And I'm so excited that once again, you all have continued to make the Professor Circle a series that's been meaningful, and I think in many ways helpful to so many of us. So thank you so much. And if there's no other questions, I'm going to call this session to an end. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.